So, what if I told you that for decades we've been tackling chronic dizziness with a completely flawed playbook? And what if the very things patients do to feel safe, like resting, or actually making them worse? Well, today we're diving into a massive shift in thinking. We're moving away from trying to fix a single broken part and starting to retrain the entire system. And this quote right here from Dr. Bridget Wallace, this is the key that unlocks the whole thing. What she's saying is, for a lot of these chronic patients, the problem isn't that their sensory system is weak. It's that it's over-responding. It's stuck in overdrive. The brain just never got the memo that the initial threat is long gone, and it's still on high alert. And you can see this idea perfectly laid out here. For years, we were stuck in that old model on the left, right? Treating the body like a car with a busted part. The practitioner was basically a mechanic, looking for a specific diagnosis, trying to fix one piece of hardware. But this new model, it completely reframes the mission. Now the focus is on the driver, the brain's entire sensory strategy. And the practitioner, they become a neural architect. The goal isn't a simple fix anymore. It's to totally retrain the brain. So how does the driver get so lost to begin with? I mean, how does the brain get trapped in this vicious loop? Well, that brings us to the actual neuroscience behind this maladaptive trap. And honestly, it reveals how patients can, without even realizing it, literally practice getting worse. It all boils down to a fundamental principle of neuroscience called Hebbian learning. You've probably heard the phrase, neurons that fire together, wire together. This is literally how our brain builds pathways and learns absolutely everything, from riding a bike to speaking a new language. But here's the catch. This process doesn't care if it's learning a good habit or a bad one. Now, get ready for a shocking twist. This one comes from the work of researcher Fredrik Tjernstrom. We usually think the problem is only happening when someone's up and about, feeling dizzy. But the research shows the complete opposite. The brain takes all that fear, all the stiffness, all the avoidance from the day, and it consolidates those experiences during rest. And this quote just drives that terrifying point home. Those maladaptive strategies, that bad wiring, it's all getting stronger while the patient is just sitting on the couch or sleeping at night. The brain is actively hardwiring the failure, making those faulty connections more and more automatic. Okay, so what does this faulty wiring actually do? Well, it causes the brain to basically reassign jobs to our sensory systems. This is what we call the sensory pivot, where the brain, in a desperate attempt to survive, forces our senses into roles they were never, ever designed for. First up, let's look at vision. In a healthy system, our eyes are our main navigators and socializers. They're expansive, they're outward-facing, helping us engage with the world around us. But in this maladaptive pivot, the brain recruits vision for a new, much cruder job. It becomes an anchor. The person stops using their eyes to explore and starts using them to just stare at the floor or a fixed point on the wall, just to feel stable. They end up trading social connection for a false sense of security. Then, the pivot messes with the role of our body sense, the somatosensory system. Its healthy function is to be a silent stabilizer. You don't consciously think about it, it just works. But when the pivot happens, this system gets turned into a hypersensitive navigator. Instead of being a quiet anchor, your feet become this noisy radar, feeling every tiny shift in the carpet as a massive threat and just overwhelming the brain with constant, useless information. Okay, so we've identified the trap. We see how the brain rewires itself for failure with the sensory pivot. The big question, the crucial question is, how do we fix it? Well, thankfully, there's a blueprint for retraining the driver, and it's known as the LaCour framework. This framework gives us 4 really key principles. First, we have to favor adaptation. We need to teach the brain to respond differently, not just try to get it to ignore the noise. Second, we have to address the stress axis because high stress hormones can literally block recovery. They put up a wall against any progress. Third, the cognitive profile is a huge deal. Pushing an anxious patient too hard can actually reinforce the feeling of threat. And finally, we have to use ecological or real-world situations because that's where the brain truly learns and reorganizes. And this framework is so critical because a generic, one-size-fits-all rehab plan can be downright dangerous. If a therapist only challenges a patient's walking without getting at the underlying sensory strategy, they can accidentally make the problem worse. They might make a patient even more dependent on their vision as an anchor, challenging the task but not the brain's faulty balance network. The solution, then, is all about applying what's called the just right challenge. And this isn't about just making an exercise harder, it's about precision.
It's about identifying that faulty strategy and applying the right direction of load, systematically loading the sensory systems that have gotten weak while actively inhibiting the ones that are screaming way too loud.
So, this all leads us to a really profound conclusion. The brain is always learning, right? Which means it has two potential paths that can follow. One is a downward spiral of failure, and the other is a carefully constructed architecture of hope. On the one hand, you've got the neuroplasticity of failure. Without the right kind of help, the brain doesn't just stay stuck. It actively practices and gets better at being dizzy. It hardwires that vision anchor and that surface radar. But on the other hand, you see the alternative, the architecture of hope. This is where the therapist becomes a neuroarchitect, helping the patient build an entirely new functional system, recalibrating the very soul of the driver. And that's the ultimate paradigm shift right there. We have to accept that the goal isn't to repair a broken part and get back to the way things were. That old person, as the source material says, is gone. The real job is to facilitate the emergence of a new person, one with a new, effective, and resilient way of navigating the world. So we're left with this final, powerful question. The dizzy brain wrote itself a desperate memo of survival based on really bad information. Our new job is to become a co-author, helping it to write a brand new memo, one that's built on trust, on accurate navigation, and on a confident return to the world. So what's the bottom line here? The big takeaway from all this? It's a clear, powerful call to action. We have to stop just chasing symptoms and trying to fix parts. It's time to start recalibrating the entire life of the person in front of us.